It all ended with a simple, impossible request. "I think you should donate to the movement," I had said, my voice laced with a confidence I didn't truly feel. 6 weeks later, Garrett came back not with a check, but with divorce papers. The weight of them in my hand felt heavier than any lie I had ever told, and I had told so many. My name is Corinne, and this is the story of how I built my perfect life on a foundation of sand, then cursed the tide for washing it all away. It began with a dress. Not just any dress, but a creation of silk and ambition for a woman I had never met. The man who commissioned it was Garrett. He walked into the boutique where I worked as a designer, and the air in the room seemed to shift, reorienting itself around him. He was 38, 13 years my senior, with the quiet, unshakable confidence of a man who had built his own world. He owned a successful travel agency, had eyes the color of a stormy sea, and a way of speaking that was both direct and kind. He was there for his girlfriend, he explained, for her birthday. Something ignited in me that day, a covetous, primal flame. It wasn't just attraction, it was a deep, unsettling sense of recognition. This was the life I was meant to have. He was the man I was meant to have. The fact that he belonged to someone else was merely a logistical problem, an obstacle to be overcome. "I can help you with that," I'd said, my smile a carefully crafted work of art. The dress became my masterpiece of manipulation. Every consultation was an opportunity. I'd invent complexities in the design, citing rare fabrics that needed sourcing or intricate beading that required his personal approval. "The color swatch doesn't do it justice in this light, Garrett. Could you possibly stop by tomorrow afternoon?" I'd ask, my voice a delicate mix of professionalism and innocent appeal. He, ever the gentleman, always agreed. My colleagues saw right through it. "Corinne, the man has a girlfriend," one of them warned gently. I brushed her off. They didn't understand the magnetic pull, the certainty I felt. This was not a game. It was destiny, and I was merely nudging it in the right direction. My best friend, Jessa, understood. She didn't judge, she strategized. Over wine one night, I laid out my predicament. "He's loyal, Jessa. A hard nut to crack. The dress is almost finished, and then he'll be gone." Jessa swirled her glass, her eyes gleaming. "Then he can't be the one to break it off," she said simply. "She has to." The plan was cruel in its simplicity. I was tasked with the final delivery. When I arrived at the girlfriend's apartment, a lovely, unassuming woman with kind eyes, I presented the gown box with a practiced smile. As she marveled at the dress, I let my smile falter, replacing it with a mask of troubled sympathy. "It's beautiful," she said, her joy so genuine it almost made me feel a pang of guilt. "Almost." "Garrett has wonderful taste," I replied, letting the words hang in the air. He spent so much time at the boutique, making sure every detail was perfect. We got to know each other quite well. I manufactured a blush, a slight downward glance. I told her he had been flirtatious, that there was a vibe between us, an unspoken connection. I didn't need to show her fake texts or pictures. I just had to plant the seed of doubt. Her trust in him was the soil, and my words were the poison. I saw the light in her eyes dim. It worked. A few days later, Garrett stormed into the boutique, his face a thundercloud. "What did you say to her?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. I played the victim, feigning shock and hurt. "She was horrible to me. She accused me of the most awful things, Garrett. I was just trying to do my job." He looked at me, his stormy eyes searching for the truth, but I had become an expert at hiding it. He left, defeated and single. The victory felt hollow for a moment, but I pushed the feeling down. The first part of the plan was complete. I gave him 6 months, a respectful mourning period for a relationship I had personally assassinated. Then, I made my move. It took nearly a year of carefully orchestrated chance encounters and persistent charm, but finally he asked me out. I had won. I had Garrett. Our courtship was a whirlwind, and after 2 years we were married. The wedding was a fairy tale, funded entirely by Garrett. He insisted. "You don't spend a dime," he'd said, cupping my face in his hands. "It's my job to take care of you." That sentence became the unofficial constitution of our marriage. And he did take care of me. We moved into a beautiful home in a gated community. Garrett handled the mortgage, the bills, the car payments, the insurance. He gave me a credit card linked to his account for household expenses and personal splurges. My salary as a designer, which was respectable, became my fun money. I bought designer bags, went on spa days with Jessa, and lived a life blissfully free of financial anxiety. It was everything I had ever wanted. A princess lifestyle, underwritten by my prince. For a while, it was perfect. I played the part of the doting wife. But the problem with getting everything you want is that you start finding new things to want. The first crack appeared over a car. I came home one afternoon to find a brand new Lexus in the driveway, a silver bow tied clumsily around the side mirror. "Surprise!" Garrett said, beaming, pulling me into a hug. "I know you said your old car was acting up." I should have been thrilled, and a part of me was. But a colder, sharper part felt a prick of resentment. "You bought a car? Without talking to me?" I asked, my voice flatter than I intended. His smile faltered. "I wanted it to be a surprise. I thought you'd love it." "I do," I said, forcing a smile. It's a huge decision, Garrett. We're a partnership. Shouldn't we make decisions like this together?" He looked genuinely confused. "But it's my money, Corey. I'm not touching your savings. I just wanted to do something nice for you." I dropped it, but the feeling lingered. I recounted the story to Jessa over brunch. She listened intently, her expression growing more severe with every word. "That's not a gift, Corinne," she said, placing her fork down with a deliberate click. "That's a power move. He's making it clear who controls the finances. It's fundamentally anti-feminist. You're his wife, not his ward. You should have equal say in all financial decisions." Her words resonated with a disturbing clarity. She was right. I was a feminist. I believed in equality. Why should his income give him unilateral power? The second crack was the kitchen. Garrett worked long hours, often not getting home until after 8. I usually finished around 5. It was the unspoken assumption that I would handle dinner. At first, I didn't mind. But soon, it became a chore, a daily symbol of my domestic entrapment. I would come home tired from my own demanding job, only to face another hour of chopping, sautéing, and cleaning. "I'm exhausted, Garrett," I complained one night, pushing a plate of pasta I'd begrudgingly made across the table. "I work all day too. Why am I the only one who ever cooks?" "Because I get home 3 hours after you," he said reasonably, though his voice was edged with weariness. "And because I pay for literally everything in this house. Is it too much to ask for a hot meal when I get home? So my contribution doesn't matter? My job isn't as important as yours?" "I never said that," he sighed, rubbing his temples. I thought this was our arrangement. I provide. You. Well, you help make our house a home? A home? Or a hotel with a live-in chef?" I retorted. I demanded we hire a housekeeper and a cook. He refused, saying it was an unnecessary expense and that we didn't need strangers in our house. The argument ended in a stalemate, with me retreating into stony silence and Garrett eating his pasta alone. The beautiful home he had bought for us was beginning to feel like a gilded cage. My discontent became a low hum beneath the surface of our perfect life. Jessa, sensing my frustration, invited me to a meeting. "It's a group of us," she explained. "Women. Feminists. We talk, we support each other. I think you'd find it validating." Validating was an understatement. The group met in a chic, minimalist loft downtown. It was a collection of about a dozen women, all intelligent, articulate, and simmering with a similar brand of righteous indignation. I poured out my stories, the car, the kitchen arguments, the feeling of being a well-cared-for possession rather than an equal partner. They listened, nodded, and affirmed my every feeling. My frustrations weren't petty. They were evidence of systemic patriarchal oppression playing out in my own home. Garrett wasn't just a tired husband with traditional values. He was a benevolent dictator, using his financial power to maintain control. The kitchen wasn't just a room, it was a battlefield for my autonomy. "You have to set boundaries, Corinne," a woman named Lena said. "Stop enabling his behavior. If you don't want to cook, then don't cook." "He's a grown man," another added. "He can figure out how to feed himself." The meetings became my sanctuary and my war room. I felt empowered, seen, understood. The advice they gave felt like a revolutionary manifesto. I was no longer just Corinne, the dissatisfied wife. I was a soldier in the fight for equality, and my home was the front line. I took their advice to heart. I stopped cooking. Completely. When Garrett came home, he'd find me on the couch, reading a book from the group's recommended list. "No dinner tonight?" he'd ask, his voice carefully neutral. I wasn't feeling up to it, I'd reply, not looking up from my page. "There's leftover pizza from the other day, I think." After a few nights of takeout and cold pizza, Garrett started cooking for himself. A small, silent victory. Then, I stopped cleaning. The laundry piled up. Dust bunnies gathered in the corners. The pristine home he was so proud of began to look neglected. I was making a statement. My time and labor were valuable, and I would no longer give them away for free. My evenings were now dedicated to the foundation. I attended every meeting, every workshop, every fundraiser planning session. I was home less and less. I was so engrossed in my new work and my new sisters that I barely noticed the growing distance between Garrett and me. Our conversations became clipped and functional. The easy intimacy we once shared evaporated, replaced by a tense, polite silence. Garrett, to his credit, was patient for a long time. He'd occasionally try to breach the wall I had built. "We don't talk anymore, Corey," he said one evening, his voice heavy with a sadness that barely registered with me. "I miss you." "I'm right here," I said, my eyes glued to my phone, texting in the group chat. "No, you're not," he whispered, so quietly I almost didn't hear him. He walked out of the room, and I felt a flicker of something guilt, perhaps, but I quickly extinguished it. This was necessary. He had to see how serious I was. He had to change. I was fighting for us, I told myself, for a more equal, more just version of our marriage. But the truth was, I had stopped fighting for us a long time ago. I was only fighting for me. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. I had spent the evening at a foundation event and came home just before 10. Garrett was in the kitchen, wiping down the counters. He had cooked for himself, eaten, and cleaned up. He turned to face me, and the exhaustion on his face had been replaced by a hard, resolute calm that scared me more than any anger. "Corinne, we need to talk," he said. His voice was level, devoid of emotion. "This isn't working." "What isn't working?" I asked, my defenses immediately shooting up. "That I finally have a life outside of this house? That I'm not just waiting by the door with your slippers and a hot meal?" "No," he said, shaking his head slowly. "What isn't working is that I feel like I'm living with a ghost. A very demanding, angry ghost. You talk about equality, but this isn't equality. This is you abandoning your share of our life together." "My share?" I scoffed. "My share is being a maid and a cook while you get to make all the real decisions?" My voice rose, fueled by weeks of rehearsed arguments from my group meetings. "I want a seat at the table, Garrett. An equal voice." He stared at me for a long moment. "A seat at the table," he repeated softly. "Okay, let's talk about the table. What exactly are you bringing to it, Corinne?" The question hung in the air, sharp and brutal. "I'm your wife. My presence at the table should be enough." "Is it?" He shot back, his calm finally cracking. "Because from where I'm standing, I bring 100% of the income that pays for this table, this house, the food on it, the cars we drive, and the clothes on your back. For years, I have asked for nothing in return except for you to be my partner, to help me make this house a home. But you don't want to be a partner. You want to be a queen who gets a vote on how the king spends his gold." He took a deep breath. "So here's the new deal. You want 50/50 equality? You've got it. Starting tomorrow, you deposit half your salary into the joint account. You pay for 50% of the mortgage, 50% of the bills, 50% of everything. In exchange, I will happily cook 50% of the meals and do 50% of the cleaning. Or, if you prefer, you can take over 100% of the finances, and I will quit my job and become a house husband. Your choice. That is equality." I was speechless. My entire ideology, my righteous anger, crumbled under the weight of his cold, inescapable logic. This wasn't the equality I had envisioned. The equality I wanted was one of power and privilege without the corresponding responsibility. He saw the shock on my face. A flicker of pain crossed his features. "I thought so," he said, his voice laced with bitter disappointment. He looked at me. truly looked at me, as if trying to find the woman he had married. In that moment of crushing tension, desperate to find some common ground, some way to remind me of the future we were supposed to build, he played his final card. "Maybe this is all because we've lost our focus," he said, his voice softening. "Corey, I think we should start talking about kids." The words hit me like a physical blow. Kids. The one topic I had masterfully evaded for our entire relationship. Before we got married, when he'd brought it up, I had been vague but agreeable. Of course, someday, I'd murmured, because it was what he wanted to hear, and I wanted him at all costs. But I had never wanted children. I loved my body, my freedom, my career. A child was an anchor I had no desire to carry. I looked at the man standing before me, his heart on his sleeve, offering the one thing he wanted most in the world as a peace offering. And I crushed it. "No," I said, my voice cold and final. "I don't want kids, Garrett. I never have." The look on his face will haunt me for the rest of my life. It wasn't anger. It was a deep, profound shattering. The realization that not only was our present a lie, but our entire future had been one, too. "You lied to me," he whispered. It wasn't a question. It was a verdict. He walked past me and out of the room, and I knew, deep down, that something had been irrevocably broken. A fragile, icy truce settled over the house in the weeks that followed. We were roommates, circling each other with wary politeness. I toned things down, pretending to agree with him, trying to lull him back into a sense of security. I didn't want a divorce. I didn't want to lose the life I had fought so hard, albeit dishonestly, to obtain. I just wanted him to change, to see things my way. But the pressure from my world outside our home was mounting. At the foundation, talk had turned to a major fundraising drive. The other women spoke proudly of the large checks their husbands had written, or the significant donations they had made themselves from their own lucrative careers. I was a prominent member, vocal and passionate, but my name wasn't on the donor list. Jessa brought it up casually, but her words were sharp. "It would look really good for you to contribute, Corinne. Show you're really committed." The shame was unbearable, but I refused to use my own money. It was a matter of principle. This was our issue, and therefore, Garrett should be the one to pay an act of penance, a symbolic contribution to the very movement he despised. My plan was as convoluted as it was desperate. I suggested we see a marriage counselor. My hope was that a neutral third party would validate my feelings, make Garrett see that he was the one at fault, and in his subsequent guilt, he would be more pliable. I would use the therapeutic breakthrough as a springboard to ask for the donation. The therapist, a calm woman in her 50s, was not the ally I had hoped for. She listened patiently to my litany of complaints. His financial control, his refusal to help around the house, his traditional expectations. Then she turned to Garrett, who laid out his side with quiet, devastating clarity. His long hours, his shouldering of all financial burdens, my complete withdrawal from their shared life, and the lie about wanting children. In our final session, the therapist looked at me over her glasses. "Corinne," she said gently, "it seems that what you're asking for isn't equality, but a transfer of power. Garrett's suggestion of a 50-over-50 split of both finances and chores is the definition of an equal partnership. Are you willing to accept that?" I left the session seething with rage. The therapist was biased, clearly a product of the patriarchy herself. The plan had backfired spectacularly. Garrett was more resolute than ever, convinced I was being brainwashed by a radical cult. Time was running out. The fundraiser was approaching. My pride was on the line. I waited for a moment when we were on relatively good terms. A quiet Saturday morning. I chose my words carefully, framing it not as a demand, but as an opportunity for him to show he was trying, to support something that was important to me. "Garrett," I began, my heart pounding, "I know we've been through a lot, but it would mean the world to me if you would consider making a donation to the Foundation's new initiative." He slowly put down his coffee cup. He didn't look at me. He just stared at the wall, a muscle twitching in his jaw. The silence stretched for an eternity. When he finally spoke, his voice was chillingly calm. "Let me get this straight," he said. "You want me to take my hard-earned money, the money I earn working 60-hour weeks while you abandon our home, and you want me to give it to the very organization that has systematically dismantled our marriage and poisoned your mind against me? It's not like that I started, but..." He cut me off. finally turning to look at me. The love was gone from his eyes. All that remained was a vast, empty expanse of disappointment. "You are the single worst decision I have ever made in my entire life," he said, each word a perfectly polished stone of contempt. He stood up and walked out of the room. I thought it was just another fight, another dramatic outburst. But there was a finality to his words that I couldn't shake. I spent the next few weeks in a state of anxious denial, hoping it would blow over. It didn't. 6 weeks to the day after my request, he came home from work early. He didn't say a word. He just walked over to where I was sitting on the couch and placed a thick manila envelope on the coffee table in front of me. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, stark and unforgiving in black and white, were the petition for dissolution of marriage. Divorce papers. He had already signed them. "I've arranged for you to stay in a hotel for a few weeks while you find your own place," he said, his voice flat, rehearsed. "I'll have movers pack your things. Just tell me where to send them." It all felt like a dream, a nightmare from which I couldn't wake. "Garrett, no," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. "We can fix this. I can change." He looked at me one last time, with a profound and heartbreaking pity. "The tragedy, Corinne," he said, "is that I don't think you can. It's been over a year. A year of unraveling, a year where the world I had so carefully constructed came crashing down, burying me in the rubble. The divorce was finalized quickly and brutally. Garrett was generous, as was his nature, but the settlement couldn't shield me from the life I now had to lead. The first casualty after my marriage was my job. The divorce took a toll I hadn't anticipated. I couldn't focus. Deadlines were missed. Designs that once flowed from me with ease now felt like impossible tasks. My creativity, once my pride and joy, had dried up, replaced by a constant, looping reel of my failures. After several warnings and a final ultimatum, I was let go. Suddenly, I was a 27-year-old divorcee with no job and a dwindling bank account. The fun money I had so frivolously spent seemed like a cruel joke now. The reality of bills, of rent, of the relentless cost of existence hit me like a physical force. I moved out of the temporary hotel and into a small, dark apartment on the other side of town. The silence in that apartment was the loudest sound I had ever heard. I tried to lean on my support system, but it crumbled beneath me. Jessa and the women from the foundation were sympathetic at first, offering words of outrage on my behalf. "He's punishing you for being a strong woman," they cried. But when my pity party stretched from weeks into months, when my calls became less about feminist theory and more about my desperate real-world problems, their interest waned. Theirs was a sisterhood of grievance, not of genuine support. They were interested in the war, not in caring for the wounded. I spent my days sending out resumes and my nights scrolling through my own story, which I had anonymously posted online in a desperate plea for validation. The comments were a brutal awakening. They called me delusional, a narcissist, a disgrace to actual feminism. They didn't see a woman fighting for equality. They saw a spoiled, manipulative girl who wanted all the benefits of a partnership with none of the responsibilities. They saw the truth I had refused to see myself. One rainy afternoon, sitting in my cramped living room, surrounded by unpacked boxes I lacked the energy to deal with, I finally allowed myself to face it. The unvarnished, ugly truth. I didn't want equality. I wanted a life of ease. I had used the language of feminism not as a shield to protect my rights, but as a sword to attack my responsibilities. I had draped my selfishness in the noble robes of ideology. I demanded a seat at the table, but I never intended to help cook the meal, set the table, or wash the dishes. I just wanted to be served. I thought back to the beginning, to the lie I told a kind stranger to steal her boyfriend. The entire foundation of my life with Garrett was rotten from the start. I hadn't won him. I had trapped him. And then I resented him for the very cage I had built. I had a husband who loved me, who provided for me, who was willing to give me the world. And I had thrown it all away because he wouldn't also give me his power, his autonomy, and his soul. I wish I could say this is a story of redemption, that I picked myself up and built a new, better life. But the truth is, I'm still just here, in the wreckage. I eventually found a junior design job, a fraction of my old salary, but it pays the rent. Most days, it's enough just to get by. Sometimes, late at night, I think of Garrett. I wonder if he ever found someone else, someone who appreciated his kindness and his quiet strength, someone who was willing to be a true partner, to bring as much to the table as she took. I hope so. He deserved that. I had prayed for a certain life, and then I lied and manipulated my way into getting it. The irony is that I destroyed it with what I claimed was my truth. I wasn't fighting a patriarchy. I was fighting my own reflection, and in the end, I was the only one who lost.